Okay, so this is my screencast 3, and we're going to start off with talking about students that are struggling with reading. 1 in 5 students is likely to have trouble learning to read. 80% of special education students have deficits in reading, and children can be identified as early as age 5. And the earlier that these reading deficits are identified and appropriate instruction is put into place, the more likely that the student will have a higher achievement level. So this is about children who may have trouble reading in the future. So there are several indicators that can be a sign of this. So children that talked late or had delayed speech, children who have trouble communicating and problematic speech patterns, limited vocabulary, difficult to understand when they speak, and slow to recall information. So the next part is about a balanced literacy program, which is used to help guide students and ensure they are efficiently learning to read and write. There are many things that this program should include, such as reading to children, phonemic awareness training, oral language development and listening experiences, guided reading with attention to comprehension, modeling of writing skills and techniques, and ongoing diagnosis to ensure skills are acquired. So one of the things on the last slide was phonemic awareness. So this is the understanding that spoken word and syllables are made up of sequences of speech sounds. It is possible to isolate these sounds in order to assist oneself in spelling and writing. This is a powerful predictor of success in learning to read, and children with phonemic processing problems may have trouble with things such as counting the syllables in a word, sounding out words when reading aloud, spelling out loud and on paper, learning to spell new words, reading passages for meaning, and understanding the meanings behind parts of speech. So here are some steps for teaching reading to learning disabled students. So step 1 is to convince the child that you can teach them to read. Step 2 is discuss and note what kind of rewards the child prefers. Step 3 is to determine what does the child know and what do they not know. Step 4 is use a wide range achievement test to determine the level of word recognition. Step 5 is to use nonsense words to determine whether the child can blend sounds into words they have never seen before. Step 6 is to listen to the child read at their independent reading level. Step 7 is to analyze your data, and then step 8 is making a plan. So this is about word walls. I included a visual of one there, and this is a visual index as well as a motivator. You can add words to the wall as they're being taught in both spelling and decoding, and you can continue to add more words throughout the year. So word families and word clumps. This is about how not every word is actually a new word, and we can look for clumps that we already know in the new words. And you can slowly introduce new vowels, starting with O since it's typically the easiest for students to understand, then move to U, then do I and E last since they tend to be more difficult for some students. You can use hand motions for short vowel sounds. For A, you can ask them to pretend they are biting an apple. So this is how to work with an emerging reader. So ensuring the student is reading every single day to an adult, this increases fluency. Also making sure the parents are involved as well and doing activities at home to help their child become a stronger reader. You can introduce new concepts to the student slowly over time and use daily decoding practice sessions and use word patterns to teach students. So this is about the Madeline Hunter Lesson Planning Guide. So this structure is simple for a teacher to lay out how they will teach their student reading skills. The Madeline Hunter plan includes the objectives where the teacher can decide which skill they are focusing on, the standards so the teacher can go through Common Core and figure out which standards they will be using. They can outline any vocabulary that is relevant for the lesson as well as any materials that may be used. They can also outline any prior knowledge the student should know coming into this lesson. They will also be able to come up with questions that the student can be asked during the lesson and that the student should be able to effectively answer. So for the actual lesson, the teacher will first need to come up with an anticipatory set, and this is used to hook the student's attention into the lesson. So this could be something like a warm-up activity. So next they'll need to decide the objective or purpose of this lesson. For this lesson, the goal is to enhance the student's reading skills, for example. The next step is the instructional input. So the teacher will explain the new information and make connections to things the student already knows. For example, teaching combinations and having the student recall the sounds that each letter makes on its own. Then the teacher can model this by showing the student what to do. And then next is guided practice, where the teacher can assist the student throughout the process. After these steps have been completed, the teacher will check for understanding. Once the teacher has ensured the student knows the material, the student will be able to independently practice their new reading skills. The teacher should provide closure to the lesson as well, and make sure the student is aware of why this was an important thing to learn. On the lesson plan, the teacher can also outline what the student can do for homework. If the lesson is being taught to more than just one student, the teacher can show how they will differentiate the instruction for the student's unique levels of need. So our next section is about writing, spelling, and speaking. So speech is the ability to create verbal language. Spelling is an individual's ability to create words that are grammatically correct. Writing is expressing one's ideas in print. And speech pathologists can provide speech remediation if speech is in an area that a student is struggling. Physical therapists can assist by providing remediation of motor issues if the student is having difficulties with writing. And reading specialists or special educators can be used if the student has trouble with reading and spelling. So, assisting students with spelling. You can make students their own word dictionary so they can continue to add new words as they continue to master them. Digital readers can also be beneficial for some students because it allows them to hear their mistakes that they may have missed while just reading over their work. And there are different spelling activities that can be useful to students, especially once they are able to recognize around 15 letters of the alphabet. So spelling methods. You can follow different processes to help the students commit the words to memory. You can say the word, spell the word, have the students repeat what you said, have the students watch you say the word again, have students repeat the phrase again, have students repeat the word and letters 3 times, and then repeating that lesson again the following day. As the week goes on, you can continue adding more words to the lesson and making it more difficult by making the tasks more complex, such as having the students write down the word in a sentence. So teaching handwriting. It's important to know your student's ability level and deciding what they need to learn accordingly. For example, you shouldn't just push a student to learn cursive who's still struggling reading standard print. You can teach coping techniques to students who are past the 4th grade and still have difficulties writing. So you can teach them how to take notes or allow them to take their notes on a computer. For teaching new styles of writing, such as cursive, you can use different methods, such as tracing activities. So, mechanics of writing for older students with learning disabilities. Some students with LD require instruction to be much more repetitive before they commit it to memory. When teaching a new skill, it's important to be patient with a student and consistent. So, here's some important factors that a student should be taught. Proofreading their work before submitting it, how to analyze sentences, how to write paragraphs, letter writing skills, emails, reports, and journal writing. So here's my Madeline Hunter planning guide for this lesson. So the standard I chose to base this lesson around was W4.9. And this standard is about drawing evidence from literary or informational text to support analysis, reflection, and research. So students will be able to apply grade 4 reading standards to literature or informational text and determine excerpts that will support analysis, reflection, or research. Prior knowledge, the student should already know how to use evidence to support other opinions. Anticipatory set, I will start off the lesson by reading to my students. I will choose something that represents the topic well, likely an argumentative excerpt that has good examples of evidence being used. So the objective or purpose of this is the student is to allow them to get engaged in the lesson and begin to understand what the lesson will be teaching. For the instructional input, I will describe the way the evidence was used in the reading I did for the class and explain how it added to the argument. For modeling, I will put up a topic we are trying to support on the board and then go through the small excerpt over the projector. I will read through the excerpt and then highlight the portion that will be the best at supporting the argument. I will then explain why that portion works well for that topic. For guided practice, I will put up a new topic and then hand out each student their own excerpt of a different one. So then I will have the students popcorn read, and then as a class, we will determine which portion will be the best for supporting the argument. I will explain why we chose the correct portion, and then have the students highlight it. Checking for understanding. I will check for understanding by doing the activity a third time, except this time I won't be assisting the students along the way. This time I will be working the crowd, ensuring that the students are on track and answering any questions that may come up. Independent practice, the students will select their own topic and find a book to support their topic. Then they will turn in a paragraph to me with their topic and the evidence that they chose from their book. Closure, we will have a discussion about the importance of including evidence in your papers. So lack of readiness, this can occur in students with learning disabilities. This can happen when a student's mental age is lower than their actual age. Visual perceptual deficit, so these can affect the understanding of information that a person sees or the ability to draw or copy. They may have difficulty writing numbers, have trouble viewing things as a set or group, difficulty accurately counting without physical objects. They may have difficulty distinguishing between shapes or difficulty lining columns up. Poor spatial sense and memory. So poor spatial sense is when students have difficulty understanding the concepts such as under versus over or more versus less. And poor memory is fairly common with students with learning disabilities. They often have difficulty memorizing facts, and they use techniques such as counting on their fingers, or you can give them accommodations such as a calculator or a chart. Purpose of assessments. So these are useful for identifying which skills the students will need to learn. While a student is taking a test, you can observe them to see the way they react to problems and how they go about solving them. And you can analyze which problems the student doesn't know and teach them those skills. So levels of understanding. Concrete, students must use physical models. Representational, students can understand symbols or pictures to solve problems. And abstract, students are able to manipulate concepts in their heads. So here's my lesson plan. The standard I chose to base this lesson around is 4NF8.2, and this standard is about understanding the equivalence of fractions and ordering. So students should be able to compare two fractions with different numerators and different denominators by creating common denominators or numerators. Vocabulary is numerator and denominator, and prior knowledge, the student should have an understanding of fractions. Anticipatory set, I can use physical objects such as an apple and cut them into halves or thirds. Then I can show the students how to add up how much it is by further cutting the apple and making it equal by being 6. The objective or purpose is to give students a visual of how they should perform these tasks and allow them to start getting an understanding while still doing a fun activity. So instructional input, I would begin with the discussion of the topic and a quick review of adding fractions with an already common denominator. Modeling, I will model this by going through the process that's on the board while talking through it and asking questions along the way. Guided practice, I will give the students a few problems to do while I also do them and talk through the process. Independent practice and checking for understanding, so I'll check for understanding by assigning the students a few problems to do on their own and walking around and making sure they're following the correct steps and getting the correct answers. And then closure, I will close the lesson by making sure all students' questions are answered.